Continuing our journey in the spring of 1652.
The hide preparation begins in the shallow depression dug near the edge of the thawing creek, a basin lined with smooth river stones and packed clay to hold water without seepage. The morning light is pale and diffused, filtering through a thin veil of cirrus clouds that stretch across the sky like polled wool. The air remains cool, carrying the damp mineral scent of wet stone and the faint earthy aroma of decaying willow leaves along the bank. A single hide is lowered into the water, its weight distributing slowly across the surface before sinking beneath. The water is cold, drawn directly from the creek, and it immediately begins to draw out the residual stiffness from the cured pelt. There is a quiet, muffled sound as the material settles, a soft exhalation of trapped air that rises in small silver bubbles. The man kneels on the grassy bank, his hands resting on his knees, observing the gradual saturation. He does not hurry. The soaking is a passive process, one that relies entirely on time and temperature. He dips his fingers into the water, feeling the chill seep into his joints, a familiar sensation that marks the season. The hide rests in the basin, its edges slowly lifting as it absorbs the moisture, becoming heavier and more pliable with each passing hour. The surrounding prairie is still, broken only by the distant call of a red-winged blackbird and the low hum of wind passing through dry grass. The man watches the water level settle, noting how the surface remains undisturbed except for the slow ripple caused by the settling material. He thinks of the long days ahead, recognizing that the transformation of this pelt will not be achieved through force, but through patience and repeated gentle intervention. The water will remain in contact with the hide for 2 full days, allowing the fibers to relax and return to a state that can accept the work of the scraper. There is no need to stir or adjust it yet. The basin holds the weight steadily, and the cool temperature prevents any premature fermentation. The man stands slowly, brushing a fine layer of dust from his knees, and walks back toward the camp to prepare the stretching frame. The work will wait for him, steady and unchanging, just as it has waited for generations. The basin itself is a simple construction, shaped by hands and time rather than precise measurements. The walls slope gently inward, packed tight with clay and lined with flat stones to prevent the water from washing away the banks during spring rains. The water within is clear, reflecting the pale sky and the slow drift of cottonwood seeds that float on the surface. When the hide was first placed, it floated lightly, but as the fibers absorbed the moisture, it sank to rest against the stone floor. The man returns in the late afternoon to check the progress. He reaches into the basin, his fingers sliding under the edge of the pelt. The texture has already shifted. The stiff, cured surface has softened into something yielding and cool. He lifts a section slightly, allowing water to drain back into the pool with a steady dripping sound. The droplets fall in a rhythmic pattern, each one striking the surface with a clear, hollow tone. He does not pull or stretch the material at this stage. The goal is uniform hydration, ensuring that every section, from the thick shoulder area to the thinner flank, receives equal saturation. The water remains cold, a necessary condition that preserves the structural integrity of the fibers while preventing bacterial growth. He notes the slight change in color, the deep brown of the cured side lightening to a muted, earthy tone as the water penetrates the grain. The scent is clean and neutral, carrying only the faint mineral quality of the creek and the natural, unprocessed odor of the pelt itself.
He allows the material to settle back into the basin, watching the ripples gradually fade into stillness. The evening air begins to cool further, and a light mist forms over the water, drifting upward like breath. The man steps back, satisfied with the even distribution of moisture. He knows that tomorrow will bring the same routine, the same quiet observation, the same steady passage of time. The basin will hold the hide until it is ready, and he will return to it when the fibers have fully relaxed. There is a quiet certainty in this waiting, a recognition that the material dictates the pace, not the worker. The camp settles into evening stillness, and the only sound is the slow, consistent dripping from the basin's edge, marking the passage of another day. As the third day approaches, the hide reaches the proper state of saturation. The man returns to the basin in the early morning when the air is crisp and the frost has just begun to melt into the soil. He kneels beside the pool and lifts the pelt slowly, supporting its full weight with both hands. It is heavy, cool, and thoroughly softened, yielding easily to the pressure of his fingers without resistance or stiffness. He carries it to a flat, grassy area near the camp, laying it out with the grain side facing upward.
The surface is smooth and damp, reflecting the low morning light with a subtle sheen. He runs his palms across the material, feeling the uniform softness that has replaced the initial rigidity. The water has done its work, opening the fiber structure and preparing the pelt for the next phase. He takes a shallow wooden tray filled with clean, cool water and gently rinses the surface, removing any residual particles or dust that may have settled during the soaking process. The sound of the water pouring over the hide is soft and continuous, a gentle cascade that washes across the grain and pools in the natural depressions. He uses his hands to guide the flow, ensuring that the entire surface is evenly rinsed. The temperature of the water matches the ambient air, preventing any sudden contraction of the fibers. After rinsing, he allows the hide to drain for a few moments, then carefully folds it in half, aligning the edges with precision. He places it on a clean, dry surface to rest, giving the fibers a brief period to adjust before the physical work begins. The thought arises naturally that this preparation is the foundation of all that follows, a quiet acknowledgement that the material must be ready before the tools can be applied. He sits beside the folded pelt, watching the slow evaporation of surface moisture, feeling the steady rhythm of the morning settle into place. The camp around him is quiet, the only movement coming from the gentle breeze that stirs the edges of nearby hide lodges. He does not rush to the next step. He waits, allowing the hide to reach the exact consistency required for the scraper. The air grows slightly warmer as the sun climbs higher, and the damp surface begins to lose its initial chill. When the time is right, he will unfold it and begin the long, repetitive process of fleshing. Until then, he remains still, observing the quiet transition from preparation to action.
The stretching frame is constructed from two parallel wooden beams, each roughly 6 feet in length, secured at each end by cross braces lashed with rawhide cords. The beams are smooth, worn from years of use, and carry the faint, polished sheen of countless hours of contact with pelt and tool. The hide is unfolded and centered on the frame, its edges pulled taut and secured with wooden pegs driven through pre-punched holes along the perimeter. The tension is applied gradually, starting from the center and working outward, ensuring that the material remains evenly stretched without distortion. The sound of the pegs being driven into the wood is a dull, rhythmic thud, each strike measured and deliberate. The man sits on a low wooden stool beside the frame, positioning himself so that the pelt lies flat and accessible. He picks up the fleshing tool, a heavy, curved blade fashioned from the rib bone of a mature animal, its edge honed to a smooth, continuous curve through repeated sharpening on river stone. The tool feels solid in his hand, balanced and familiar, its weight distributed evenly along the grip. He places the blade against the inner surface of the hide, angling it slightly to follow the natural curve of the pelt. The first stroke is slow, applying steady pressure as the bone edge glides across the damp fibers. The sound is a quiet, continuous hiss, a soft scraping that moves along the length of the material. The blade removes a thin layer of residual tissue and moisture, leaving behind a cleaner, more uniform surface. The man works in long, overlapping strokes, moving from the center toward the edges, his arm extending fully with each pass before returning to the starting point. The rhythm is steady, mimicking the slow, deep breathing of a person at rest. There is no force, only consistent pressure and controlled motion. The hide responds gradually, the fibers tightening slightly under the tension of the frame, while the inner surface becomes smoother with each pass. The air around the workspace remains cool, carrying the faint, damp scent of wet hide and polished bone. The man pauses occasionally to wipe the blade with a soft cloth, removing the accumulated residue before continuing. His thoughts remain centered on the movement, the alignment of the tool, the evenness of the stroke. He does not look at the distant horizon or the passing clouds. His focus is entirely on the immediate surface, the tactile feedback traveling from the blade through his hand and up his arm. The work continues in this manner for hours, the repetitive motion creating a quiet, hypnotic rhythm that fills the space. The frame holds steady, the pegs remain secure, and the hide gradually transforms under the steady pressure of the bone scraper. There is no urgency, only the continuous, unchanging flow of the task. The second pass with the scraper begins after a brief rest, allowing the hide to adjust to the tension and the tool to be cleaned and repositioned. The man shifts slightly on his stool, adjusting his posture to maintain a comfortable angle for the next set of strokes. The hide now feels firmer, the initial moisture having been worked out and the fibers settling into their stretched position. He places the blade against the surface once more, applying the same steady pressure, but with a slightly different angle to ensure complete coverage. The sound remains consistent, a soft, rhythmic hiss that repeats with every full extension of the arm. The bone edge catches lightly on any remaining uneven areas, lifting them away in thin, translucent layers that curl gently before falling to the ground. The residue is minimal at this stage, consisting mostly of fine, damp particles that blend into the soil beneath the frame. The man works methodically, section by section, ensuring that no area is overlooked. He moves from the broad shoulder region to the narrower flank, adjusting the pressure to match the varying thickness of the pelt. The thicker sections require slightly more force, but the movement remains smooth and controlled. The frame creaks occasionally as the tension shifts, a low wooden sound that blends seamlessly with the scraping rhythm. The air remains cool, and the hide retains a slight dampness that prevents the fibers from drying too quickly and becoming brittle. The man's hands move with practiced ease, the muscles in his forearm engaging only enough to maintain the blade's alignment. He does not fight the material, he guides it, allowing the tool to do the work, while his hands provide steady direction. The thought arises that this phase is less about removal and more about alignment, a process of evening out the surface so that it will accept the subsequent treatments evenly. He pauses to inspect the progress, running his fingers lightly over the scraped area. The texture is uniform, smooth and cool to the touch, with a subtle sheen that reflects the morning light. He returns to the stool and continues, the rhythm unbroken, the strokes steady and precise. The hours pass without notice, marked only by the gradual lightening of the hide's inner surface and the soft, continuous sound of bone on wet fibers. The camp remains quiet, the work proceeding in its own unhurried time. The final scraping pass focuses on refinement and consistency. The man moves to the outer edges of the frame, where the hide is slightly thinner and more responsive to light pressure. The blade glides across the surface with minimal resistance, producing a softer, whisper-like sound that contrasts with the deeper hiss of the earlier strokes. He pays close attention to the transitions between sections, ensuring that there are no abrupt changes in texture or thickness. The hide now feels fully prepared, the inner surface smooth and even, the fibers aligned and ready for the next stage.
He sets the scraper aside and runs both hands over the entire surface, feeling for any remaining irregularities. The tactile feedback is consistent across the pelt, a uniform coolness that confirms the evenness of the work. He adjusts a few pegs along the edge, tightening the tension slightly to prepare for the drying phase. The sound of the pegs shifting in the wood is a quiet wooden click, followed by the soft rustle of the hide settling into its new position. The sun has moved higher, casting a pale, even light across the workspace. The air remains cool, but the surface of the hide begins to lose its dampness, drying slowly under the steady breeze. The man sits back, observing the gradual transformation. The hide no longer feels like raw material. It has taken on a structured, deliberate quality, shaped by time and repetition. He thinks of the next steps, knowing that the stretching and drying will require similar patience, similar attention to detail. There is no rush to move forward. He allows the hide to rest, letting the fibers adjust to the tension and the surface dry naturally. The frame stands steady, the pegs secure, the workspace quiet except for the occasional rustle of wind through the camp. The man remains seated, his hands resting in his lap, watching the slow, steady passage of the morning. The work is complete for now, and the hide will continue to settle in its own time. He knows that when it is ready, the next phase will begin, just as this one did, with patience, repetition, and quiet attention. The stretching process begins once the hide has dried sufficiently to hold tension without excessive moisture. The man removes the wooden pegs along the perimeter, allowing the hide to relax slightly before repositioning it for the next phase. He works from the center outward, pulling the material taut and securing it again with fresh pegs placed at regular intervals. The tension is applied evenly, ensuring that the hide remains flat and free from wrinkles or distortions. The sound of the pegs being driven is steady and rhythmic, each strike measured to avoid splitting the wood or tearing the hide. He moves around the frame, adjusting the tension as needed, his hands working with a calm, deliberate precision. The hide responds to the pull, the fibers aligning further, and the surface becoming smoother under the even pressure. The man takes a second, heavier stretching tool, a long wooden pole with a rounded, smooth end, and places it against the inner surface. He presses the pole firmly against the hide, rolling it slowly from the center toward the edge. The sound is a deep, muffled thud, followed by a soft, sliding noise as the pole moves across the material. The rolling action compresses the fibers further, ensuring that the tension is distributed uniformly across the entire surface. He repeats this motion in overlapping passes, working in straight lines that intersect at the center. The rhythm is consistent, the pressure steady, the movement unhurried. The hide gradually takes on a more defined shape, the edges pulling taut and the surface becoming completely flat. The air remains cool and the hide retains a slight flexibility, allowing the fibers to adjust without becoming brittle. The man pauses to inspect the progress, running his fingers lightly over the surface to check for any remaining uneven areas. The texture is uniform, smooth and cool, with a subtle firmness that indicates the fibers are properly aligned. He continues the rolling process, moving to the next section, maintaining the same steady rhythm. The frame holds the tension securely, the pegs remain in place, and the work proceeds in its own quiet time. There is no need to rush. The hide will stretch and settle as it is meant to, guided by repetition and consistent pressure. The camp remains still, the only sounds coming from the wooden pole moving across the hide and the occasional rustle of wind through the grass. The man works steadily, his focus entirely on the task, his movements calm and measured. The second phase of stretching focuses on the edges and corners, areas that require slightly more attention due to their natural tendency to contract. The man repositions the wooden pole, adjusting his stance to reach the outer perimeter of the hide. He applies the rolling motion with a slightly lighter touch, ensuring that the tension remains even without overstressing the thinner sections. The sound is softer here, a gentle, sliding thud that moves along the edge of the frame. He works methodically, section by section, moving from one corner to the next, his hands guiding the pole with steady, controlled movements. The hide responds gradually, the fibers stretching evenly, and the surface becoming completely flat across the entire area. He pauses occasionally to check the tension, pressing lightly with his fingertips to feel for any areas that may be too loose or too tight. Adjustments are made by shifting the pegs slightly, allowing the hide to settle into its new position before continuing. The rhythm remains consistent, the pressure steady, the movement unhurried. The air around the workspace remains cool, carrying the faint, clean scent of drying hide and polished wood. The man's hands move with practiced ease, the muscles in his arms engaging only enough to maintain the pole's alignment. He does not force the material, he guides it, allowing the tension to distribute naturally. The thought arises that this phase is about balance, a quiet process of ensuring that the hide will hold its shape without warping or distorting over time. He pauses to inspect the progress, running his hands over the surface once more. The texture is uniform, firm and smooth, with no visible irregularities. He returns to the edge and continues, the rhythm unbroken, the strokes steady and precise. The hours pass without notice, marked only by the gradual tightening of the hide and the soft, continuous sound of the wooden pole moving across the surface. The camp remains quiet, the work proceeding in its own unhurried time. The final stretching pass ensures complete uniformity across the entire hide. The man moves to the central area, where the fibers have settled into their final position under the even tension. He uses the wooden pole with a lighter touch, applying short, controlled strokes that compress the surface without adding excessive pressure. The sound is a soft, rhythmic tapping, followed by a quiet sliding noise as the pole moves across the material. He works in a circular pattern, starting from the center and moving outward, ensuring that every section receives equal attention. The hide responds with a subtle firmness, the fibers fully aligned and the surface completely flat. He sets the pole aside and runs both hands over the entire area, feeling for any remaining inconsistencies. The tactile feedback is even, a uniform coolness and firmness that confirms the success of the stretching process. He adjusts a few pegs along the perimeter, tightening the tension slightly to lock the hide into its final shape. The sound of the pegs shifting is a quiet wooden click, followed by the soft rustle of the hide settling into place. The sun has moved higher, casting a pale, even light across the workspace. The air remains cool, but the surface of the hide begins to lose its residual moisture, drying slowly under the steady breeze. The man sits back, observing the gradual transformation. The hide no longer feels like raw material. It has taken on a structured, deliberate quality, shaped by time, tension, and repetition. He thinks of the next steps, knowing that the application of fat and the smoking process will require similar patience, similar attention to detail. There is no rush to move forward. He allows the hide to rest, letting the fibers adjust to the final tension and the surface dry naturally. The frame stands steady, the pegs secure, the workspace quiet, except for the occasional rustle of wind through the camp. The man remains seated, his hands resting in his lap, watching the slow, steady passage of the morning. The work is complete for now, and the hide will continue to settle in its own time. He knows that when it is ready, the next phase will begin, just as this one did, with patience, repetition, and quiet attention.